Maxwell, your host today on Comtech Now. Today, we'll be taking a look at the development of printing over time, from the very beginning of what is now called printing to where we see it going in the future. First, we will do a rewind segment. Follow us as we travel back in time with Meisha and Katelyn.
Let's start from the very beginning. The history of printing started in 200 AD with the invention of woodblock printing in China. Wooden blocks were carved out to create a relief image. It was then used to print on everything: paper, books, and even cloth. In fact, the world's earliest books have been printed with this technique. Wooden block printing first made its way into European culture at around 400 AD. This was an important foundation for future printing advancements.
In 1440, another development had occurred in printing. In the Holy Roman Empire, Johannes Gutenberg had invented the printing press, a tool which applied pressure to paper or cloth which rested over an ink surface in order to print items, typically various texts. This innovation made it possible to print in large quantities. A Renaissance printing press could print 3,600 pages per workday, as compared to the typical 40 pages done by topographic hand printing and hand copying. This led to the widespread printing of books, which allowed the spreading of knowledge and education across Europe.
In 1843, the rotary press was invented by Richard March Hoe. It was a printing process which involved running a piece of paper, often from a paper roll, through cylinders that contained the printing plates to print a piece of text. This invention helped turn printing into an industrial event and was an important innovation towards the spread of communication due to its contributions towards newspaper printing. Now let's go to Katelyn for more information.
Towards the end of the 19th century, three inventors had a great idea that changed the world forever. Three men by the names of Christopher Scholes, Carlos Glidden, and Samuel Sewell invented a machine consisting of only a keyboard and a wooden spacebar. Although the idea was very simple, this ingenious device, later called a typewriter, was invented to allow fast, efficient, and legible writing. The keyboard typed only in capital letters and introduced the QWERTY keyboard system. The typewriter decreased the need for a large workforce and allowed businesses to advance in productivity. It also provided a profession for women in the office, which contributed to the improvement of women's rights. 100 years later, Gary Starkweather, a young researcher for a printing company by the name of Xerox, was sitting in his New York lab when he suddenly came up with the idea of creating a computer that could reproduce an original copy. The idea of a laser printer was born. Despite the denunciation of his bosses, Starkweather continued working on the laser printer, believing that one day he would succeed. A year later, Starkweather unveiled his prototype to another Xerox research center in California, which hit a home run. Starkweather finally felt free to be able to experiment with his printer and completed the first working laser printer in 1971. It was named the Xerox 9700. As the first high-volume page printer, the Xerox 9700 was able to produce high-quality text on a plain piece of paper, while also producing many different fonts, graphics, and logos. In 1977, it became very popular for commercial purposes. And finally, there is inkjet printing. In 1976, the inkjet printer was invented and designed to be inexpensive and very convenient for offices, schools, and home use. Inkjet printers are non-impact printers, which means that they do not actually touch the paper to create an image. They drop extremely small dots of ink onto a paper with the help of a series of nozzles. The inkjet printer is now one of the most common types of printers used. Now that you have a brief summary on the history of printing, let's go back to the studio. Marylin?
Thank you, Katelyn. Now we go to the future to see how far printing is predicted to go soon and later on. Joining me is Jenney, our future predictor. Hello, Jenney.
Hello. The first innovation I'm going to talk about is 3D printing. Started in 1986, 3D printers are able to scan an already existing object or apply a blueprint. The printer then uses either extrusion deposition, where lines of plastic are squeezed in a pattern to form a shape, granular materials binding, a selective fusing technique, or photopolymerization, where liquid polymer is hardened. With this, prototypes can be made very quickly and products can be manufactured faster and cheaper. Domestically, this technology is currently used by hobbyists, but perhaps we can have household 3D printing in the future. Here is Marylin with an interview on the topic.
So I went to talk to Mr. Bug about printing, and as one of the teachers involved with 3D printing at Bayview Secondary School, he had a wealth of knowledge about the subject. I asked him a few questions. Mr. Bug, so I understand you work a lot with the 3D printers. What's the extent of detail and size these printers can handle?
Well, size is based on the platform of the printer. That would be the plate that it's working on, so that's the working envelope. As far as detail, some examples will show you that the detail is approximately a 1/16 of an inch thick as far as width of the material, and the height is again determined by the size of the machine.
Oh, so with a machine like that, you could lower and raise the platform so it could be bigger, or?
Exactly. This machine feeds in what we call Z. This is X, and this is the Y direction. So think of it as a piece of graph paper laying down flat on a desk, but now we're stacking the graphs on top of each other and to create a three-dimensional view.
So how would you say these printers have helped with the education of baby students?
It's giving them real-world experience in the 21st century. Instead of having them build birdhouses and toolboxes by hand with old-fashioned tools, we're having them use state-of-the-art software to design and create individual projects based on parameters in the project, mostly the size of our machine, and then they can print them off. So it's something that's done in the real world today for actual product development. So partners that are creating things outside of their normal areas can share their resources to display to potential customers what they're able to create without having millions of dollars invested into a plant, and then they can just have it produced anywhere in the world.
So these 3D printers, these ones only print plastic?
This one prints plastic. It actually is similar to a hot melt glue gun. It uses this material here, and it heats it up until it melts, and it shoots it out of a nozzle, and then it stacks one line of plastic on top of another to create the actual model. There's different types of printers. Another one actually adds a cyanoacrylic glue to a powder medium, and it sticks it together one dot of glue at a time. And now we're doing it with metal in industry, where we're actually pumping metal out and printing layers of metal one on top of the other for an instant finished part that goes right into an assembly.
What do you foresee is the future of these printers?
The printer will allow small businesses to make final end products right on site. So that's the goal of the printing people that create these machines. But as it stands right now, they're still primarily used for prototype development to display a potential product to a buyer in order to receive bank financing into creating much more viable businesses, whereas before you needed millions of dollars in investment. Now you can just outsource your final product to third world countries.
Thank you for taking time to join us today. We've learned a lot about 3D printing. Back to you, Jenney.
Thank you, Marylin, for that wonderful interview. Over time, printers have also increased paper use and consequently deforestation and pollution from fossil fuel and chemical usage. Thus, many groups around the world are now taking initiatives to decrease our paper use. One recent example is the Prairie Pulp and Paper Plant's plan to build an eco-mill in Manitoba. The mill will produce a tree-free paper made of 80% wheat straw and 20% sustainable wood fibers. Finally, nanography is a new printing technique currently being researched by Landa. The idea is that printers will use tiny droplets of ink only nanometers big to create a very high-quality image. Landa plans to put the ink droplets on a heated blanket to evaporate the water in the ink. The printed image can then be immediately placed onto paper or plastic without any additional adhesive or finishing, shortening the packaging time significantly.
This concludes our exciting segment on printing. Tune in next week where we'll be talking about a new topic.